All right, well, so we're getting underway here. Let me just get organized. There we go. So this is lesson 2 in the mini course on how to write an awesome short story, even if you've never written anything before in your entire life. So if you recall in lesson 1, we spent a little bit of time looking at how to structure a short story so that there's lots of tension and good stuff in it based on the hero's journey, and then also how to come up with some story ideas as well. So today we're going to focus on the next steps in writing a short story. So let's have a look at this then. So the stories are essentially based on a 3-act structure with a beginning, a middle, and an end, as you probably know. So the idea behind this kind of structure is that at the beginning there's some kind of inciting incident, something that happens that pushes our hero out into the world, and there's rising tension brought on by increasing amounts of obstacles with increasing difficulty to overcome them. There's finally there's finally a major crisis, a climax that happens, and then descending action to the end. So that's essentially what our little 5-scene process tries to mimic. And of course, you could do a lot of other things with it too. You can have 7 scenes, you can have 13, you can have any number that you want. It all follows the same structure, more or less. So you remember this is what we looked at. And if you haven't downloaded your Word version of this, you can find it on the website in the email that you got sent. So we have our 5-scene example. Where our lead experiences a crisis, and then they have a reaction to it, and then off they go on their quest. There are 4 aspects of writing. 3 of these are more or less skills that anyone can learn. Mechanical, technical, editing. This is basically how to put words together, how to edit them, how to put a sentence together, and so on. All of those skills can be learned by anyone. But the creative aspect of writing is not learned. Creativity is like a muscle. We all have it, but some of us have more than others. But notwithstanding that, anyone can build their muscles up. We can become stronger through exercise and practice and so on, and creativity is no different. So if you're thinking that you don't have a creative bone in your body, you are wrong. And it just means that you need to spend a bit of time practicing and developing it. And that's all there is to it. So if you've got the time and the inclination, you can develop your creativity really, really well. I want you to think about some of the biggest obstacles to your own writing. What came out in many of the workshops are the following 3. First of all, finding time to write, because we have jobs or school or family obligations or other things going on. Sometimes life gets in the way. And because writing is seen as a low priority activity, quite often it's the one that gets thrown out at the end. So finding the time to write is challenging. Second, many writers feel that they try to be perfect. They try to create the best story possible and spend a lot of time on it. And you might be one of these writers yourself, where you can spend years on a story and still not finish it. So trying to be a perfectionist is a real problem. It's a real obstacle to writing. And so is absence or aversion to structure. Some people say, well, I don't like templates. I don't like following a structure. I just like to write by the seat of my pants, see where the stories go. And there are some people who can do that, but very, very few. And for most of us, we need some kind of roadmap. We need a guideline of some kind, like the 5-scene template, something to guide our thinking and our writing so that we know where we're finishing and we're working towards that instead of just flying by the seat of our pants. So these are some of the biggest obstacles to writing. But I'm going to share with you the real secret to becoming a solid writer. And it's not about talent. It's not about knowledge. It's not about coming up with great story ideas. The biggest secret to becoming a writer is to actually sit down and write. And that might seem obvious because it is. It is the most difficult thing to sit down at your desk or sit down at your workstation or in your lazy boy, wherever it might be, and actually put words on paper that come out of your head. So this really is the biggest secret to writing. If you can get into the habit of actually writing words down, you will become a writer faster than anyone who watches videos or reads books or anything like that. You've got to be able to find the time or make the time to write. Now, within the story itself, there's a real need for tension. You'll recall in that rising action kind of model, with the 3-act model that we looked at earlier, there were obstacles coming all the time. And these are designed to increase the tension in the story. If there is no tension in your story, there really is no story at all. So when you're planning and plotting and looking at your 5-section template, at your plot there, you should always be thinking, how can I build more tension into this scene? How can I make this more difficult for my hero? And if you do that, you're going to create a story that's, quote unquote, a real page turner, because that's what we're looking for, is that kind of story. All right, so that might be well and fine. So let's suppose that you've got your 5-section template. You've sketched out the elements of a story. You know who your hero is, who your antagonist is. You know more or less what they're after. So how do you actually start writing, other than once upon a time, right? So what you want to do is you want to show your lead character, your hero, doing what they normally do in life. So maybe they're sitting on the bus going to work. Maybe they're in a classroom listening to a chemistry teacher, whatever it might be. But then the inciting incident happens, the crisis event happens, and you want to begin your story as close to that crisis as possible. The reason for this is that we want to hook our reader in right from the very start, get them involved in the story, and the best way to do that is to throw a crisis at our hero and get them going into action. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we're going to write in the lead character's viewpoint, which means that as a writer, you're narrating the story. He did this, she went there, but you're doing it through the eyes of the character. So if the character doesn't see something, then the reader doesn't see it either. Okay? So we'll talk a little bit more about viewpoint in a second. The other thing, of course, to do is now that you've got your 5-section plan, you just start writing the first section and then the next one and then the next one until you're done. Some people ask if they can start in the middle with their section writing or start at the end because they really want to get to the end. You can do that, but in my experience, I've found that unless you do it sequentially, you're going to have to go back and rewrite sections anyway, just because that's the nature of the creative process. Is even though you have a plan to follow, the creative process is such that you will be changing it a little bit. You'll be modifying it as you go along. So then we're going to be writing 3 drafts. Okay, the first draft is just getting the story out. Don't worry if it's good or not. There will be spelling mistakes and grammar mistakes and problems with sentence structure and all that other kind of stuff, but don't worry about that. This isn't the time to fix it when you're just trying to get the story out of your head and onto the paper. So the first draft is just getting the story out. The second draft, when you go back to revise it, that's where you're going to fix your spelling and your grammar, your sentence structure. You're going to add some nice juicy words and other things into it as well. You'll look at showing the reader instead of telling the reader. And then once you've done that, the third draft is the final draft, and that's where you're simply tweaking it. So you might stick your story away for a few days, then come back to it, and at this point you're simply making little final tweaks. You're not going through a full-out edit. You're not rewriting your story here. You're just tweaking it. The idea here is that after you've done that third draft, your final revisions, it's over. It's done, and it's back on the shelf. Or you're sending it to your friends for feedback, or you're doing something with it, but you're not rewriting it anymore. It's done. You're moving on to your next story. Remember my crazy random rule of 10, and that said that your 10th story is the one that's going to be pretty good. So you want to get there as quickly as you can. And if you spend too much time and effort rewriting and revising and doing all of those things over and over and over again, you'll never get to your 10th story. So we want to finish the story, tweak it, and then done. It's over, and move on to the next one. So here's what I mean more about viewpoint writing. What it really is third person limited. So you're writing in the third person, which is like she did this and she did that, but it's limited to what the character experiences. So the reader only sees the world through the character's eyes, and therefore there's still a lot that's hidden from the reader and from the character, right? So as the writer, you must put yourself into that character's head and tell the story that way. Okay, so it's a little tricky, but if you're stuck at all, just think about first person. I woke up this morning, I got on the bus to go to work. There was some character came on the bus and he smelled really bad. So you're telling the story through your own voice, through your own eyes, but now we're just shifting it from first person to third person. He got up in the morning, he jumped on the bus, some smelly guy came in, sat beside him, that sort of thing. So just you practice it a little bit, it'll become much, much easier. Oh, and I should say, now the reason why we do this, why I really prefer third person limited, is because it brings the reader closer into the story. It engages them so much better because then the reader starts to see themselves as that character. And the more engagement we can get with our reader, the harder it is for them to put our story down. So this is a good thing. Okay, so what you want to do next now is we've got your plot put together, and you're aware of building tension into your story. So now let's actually start writing it. Look at your first section, introduce your lead character and what they're doing in their normal life, and then throw that crisis at them. So take your 5-scene outline and just begin writing out your sections, starting with the first one. Don't worry if it's good or not. Okay, so I can guarantee you it's not going to be very good. It's a first draft. Of course, it's not going to be very good. So don't worry about that. Just get the story out. You can fix it up later. What I'd suggest is aiming for anywhere from 300 to 500 words per section on average. So if you've got 5 sections, and you're looking at 500 words on average for each one, that's a 2,500 word short story. That's pretty good. So aim for that. And of course, some sections might be a bit longer than others. The first one is usually a little bit longer because you're introducing setting, character, crisis. So a lot is going on in that first section. But you want to aim for anywhere from 300 to 500 words on average for each section. That will really help the pacing of the story as you go through it. So that's your challenge for lesson 2, is to begin writing your story, and shortly you'll be getting lesson 3, and we'll see what happens then. If you want more information or have any questions or anything else, there's other resources on OttawaWritingWorkshops.com, and you can always email me for comment and feedback as well. So I'm happy to do that for you, and we'll see you next time then.